Hey guys, and welcome to JBM Sports Media. I am going to dive into what happened with the Mets this season, seeing a lot of things back and forth of what actually went wrong. A lot of people like to throw out that they had the second highest payroll in baseball, which is rightfully so. But realistically, it's not that simple. It's a little more complex than just the highest pay. One of the highest payrolls in baseball completely failed. Overall, through the first 69 games, they started off really hot. They were one of the best teams in baseball. They were 45-26, and they had a 5.5 game lead in the National League East over Philadelphia. As we know, we saw Atlanta completely fell off the map. So that 3-team race that I thought was going to be never showed up. It was unfortunate because you always like to see all three of those teams play at their best and get an absolute dogfight in the East, which I anticipated to an extent. I didn't have Atlanta actually making the playoffs, but that's a whole story for another day. If you guys listen to Diamond Discussions ever, we've discussed it multiple times. But what I would like to say and what I would like to really break down here is the point and the pieces of this season that everybody seems to miss, and everyone wants to just overlook and pretend it's not a thing because all they see is second highest payroll in baseball, which that's the headline grab. I totally understand it. But again, it's a little more complex than just the highest pay. One of the highest payrolls failed. They had a ton of injuries, especially to their pitching staff that was essentially already in question. They brought in guys like Griffin Canning. They brought back Sean Manaea. They signed Frankie Montas, that was the signing of the offseason going into this that I was just like, what? I hated that signing, and it ended up failing miserably. Unfortunately, Montas, he had Tommy John surgery, and it seems that issue kind of resolved itself to an extent. So I don't think we're going to see Montas as a Met anymore, nor should we, even without the Tommy John surgery. But there were some questionable decisions when it came to the pitching staff, and what I feel like a lot of people don't view or don't see the right way is the way that the Mets are trying to build their team. And if you remember anything other than, Steve Cohen, when he first bought the team, everybody loves to jump on the fact that he said within the first 5 years, we're going to win a World Series championship. And I love the enthusiasm. It obviously failed in the first 5 years. That did not happen. I also believe that he learned the hard way going through this whole process of the last 5 years. He learned the hard way when he signed guys like Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander that season to just basically throw money at the problem and try to fix it. And again, he learned the hard way that that's not how you're going to do things. And he said flat out, and something that a lot of people don't like to not really pay attention to, and he said it multiple times, he wants to build essentially what the Dodgers are doing out in LA. And now, if you look at the Dodgers, they have one of the best pitching staffs in baseball. They have one of the best lineups in baseball, and they have one of the best farm systems in baseball. And that's what the Mets are obviously essentially trying to do. That doesn't happen in an offseason. Now, obviously, signing Juan Soto and having the season you did the year prior in 2024 over exceeding expectations, obviously, by going to the NLCS and missing the World Series by 2 games. They over exceeded themselves. They were not realistically. They were maybe a wild card team last year. That's what everybody was saying. And look at how obviously that turned out. So with the over expectations going into this season, adding on Juan Soto, obviously the pressure is on, and they should have made the playoffs. You look at it, you can say there's no excuse and things like that. And I totally understand that aspect, but you really have to break down what went wrong. And again, a lot has to do with the injuries to this pitching staff. Again, that was in question. The guys they brought in, Clay Holmes was another one. You were asking guys to go to uncharted waters. A guy like David Peterson, he never pitched over 120 innings in a season. Clay Holmes hasn't pitched over 100 innings in, 8 years? Probably since when he was in the minor leagues. So you were asking a lot from a lot of players that have not done certain things like that. Like I said, David Peterson, Clay Holmes, it was all uncharted waters. Griffin Canning, he was a very huge bright spot in his 16 starts with the Mets. He looked fantastic. He had a couple of rough starts, but who doesn't? For a guy like him to be maybe labeled as potentially your 4th or 5th guy, he was almost the outside looking in going into spring training. Like he might have been the 6th. And he kind of pushed himself and elevated himself to maybe being a number 3 at that point in time before before he blew up his Achilles, honestly. And that was a huge part of it. If you guys don't remember as well, Kodai Senga was unbelievable in the beginning, and then he had the hamstring issue when he was running to first base, and Alonso overthrew, and Senga went for that jump, and he pulled his hammy, and ever since then he was never the same. Sean Manaea missed a substantial amount of time to start the season. At the beginning, if you guys remember, he was due to come back in May, early May, mid-May, and we almost didn't get him until the All-Star break. So that was a huge blow, and he never returned to the form that he was last season, the guy he developed himself into in the second half of the season. That never showed up. Could it be the injury to him? Could that have sidelined him? Maybe he wasn't fully ready and just said, screw it, I'm coming back. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not him. I'm not a part of the Mets medical team. That could just be me speculating, and I really don't want to, obviously go down roads like that. The other thing, another huge aspect to them, what they missed was AJ Minter. He was supposed to be your premier lefty and setup man in that bullpen, and he had the torn bicep, sidelined him through the entire season. That was a huge blow. So the pitching staff, as the season went on, that already had a huge amount of question marks, continued to just get weaker and weaker and weaker. And like I had mentioned, Kodai Senga was leading the league in ERA before he got hurt, and then came back and never found his form and ended up in AAA, which I would like to shout him out for the fact that he took that assignment in stride. He easily could afford it. It was in his contract. He could have basically just outright said no. And he did the modest thing and said, you know what, there's clearly things I have to work on. And so I my hat's off to him for actually accepting the assignment and not making a big deal out of it and becoming more of a distraction and to try to get himself right. I know that the competitor that he is, it obviously drove him nuts to not be a part of what obviously essentially happened throughout the season. And he would want to contribute. Now, what I would like to go into also is the failure of the trade deadline as well. But before I get there, the other aspect to it as well, some of the other big key injuries, if you guys remember, Jeff McNeil missed a lot of time. Another piece in the bullpen that mixed time who looked good in the beginning was Max Kranick. He looked great as he came up through spring training and the early parts of the season. He went down. Frankie Montas, I mentioned him already. He missed a big portion. And you know what? At this point, Frankie Montas, if he would have just been a viable number 5 and just ate up some innings and been halfway decent and gave you a good start here and there, I guess I would have taken it, because what else do we have? What other choice do we have? Jesse Winker, I think, was a huge injury for them. I know he doesn't, and listen, people will laugh at that. That's fine. But, he doesn't put up the big eye-popping numbers, but his presence in the clubhouse and what he brings to the table, the energy that he brings, I think they were missing that. And that was clearly evident. But what I would like to get into is the deadline acquisitions that completely failed. Other than one, really. Only one of the 4 were pretty solid. But this is the one I disagreed with completely, and that was the acquisition of Cedric Mullins. My thing on him was, you brought him in, and he was basically just a left-handed hitter, a left-handed hitting version of Tyrone Taylor with a weaker arm. He had a little more pop, but other than that, their averages were about the same, and they brought just about the same thing to the table. So I wasn't necessarily crazy about that move in particular. And as you guys could see the numbers right there on the screen, Mullins had an awful, awful time in a New York Mets uniform. It really was sad to see. I mean, the guy hit under 200, he had $182. 2 home runs, 4 doubles. He had 6 total extra base hits. I'm sorry, 7 total extra base hits as a Met. That's not what we brought him in for. Now, listen, all in all, they didn't spend a ton to get most of these guys, and which was obviously a good thing, but these deals did not work out. Like I said, I was not crazy about Cedric Mullins. I was not crazy about Luis Robert either if they went after him. I just didn't see I didn't see the biggest upgrade there, because, like I said, Tyrone Taylor was holding things down for the most part. You could have threw McNeil in center. You could have threw Luis Angel Acuna in center, at least I thought, but they decided to go that way. To me, this was the biggest blunder, though. Ryan Helsley. Any team going into that deadline, and I've talked to people, Dodger fans, I've talked to everybody, because the Dodgers obviously have a problem in the bullpen as well. Every single person, especially for the package that the Mets gave up to get Ryan Helsley, everybody does this deal 10 out of 10. If you saw his season prior to coming to the Mets, like I said, the numbers are right in front of you. I mean, not that he was lights out, but look at that. He gave up more runs in less time with the Mets than he did in St. Louis. I mean, he went from a 3 ERA, and then he jumped up to over a 7. That is terrible. And that is also part of the reason why this team collapsed and why it failed, because the acquisitions that you brought in did not perform. Who would have saw that coming? Realistically, you have these deals that you make, assuming they're going to perform to what they were, and Helsley just didn't do it. And he was, to me, was the biggest blunder of them all at the deadline, and it was unfortunate. It was kind of the Craig Kimbrell from the Chicago Cubs to the Chicago White Sox effect, where if he wasn't closing games, if you guys remember that deadline a few years ago, he wasn't closing games, he was ineffective. And that seems to be what happened to Ryan Helsley. So all in all, that was a huge disappointment. The other guy, the left-hander, Gregory Soto, he was brought in before everybody else. In the beginning, he looked great. I think he went his first 11 innings without giving up a run. He looked great, and then he started to obviously not hold up as the season finished out. As you see his number, he also had a negative WAR, and he had almost a 4.5 ERA. I mean, that's not going to win you games, especially when you have an overtaxed bullpen going into this point with the fact of what you're missing in starting pitching. You had guys like Peterson who ran out of gas at this point. You had Clay Holmes, who I don't even want to say the kid ran out of gas, because the season on the line, game 161, Clay Holmes went out like a dog and pitched an amazing 6 innings to keep the Mets still alive. So I can't even really rip Clay Holmes at all. He exceeded expectations for me, but this is also part of the problem. A guy like Gregory Soto, who, again, none of these deals, maybe outside of the next guy I'm going to bring up, really a lot was spent on them, which I think was good. If they would have overspent, then that could have been a problem, obviously. But I don't think they did. The final acquisition, and he actually pitched pretty well, just about up to numbers, was Tyler Rogers. Got him over from San Francisco, and Met fans went crazy when they saw the package that we gave up. Obviously, Drew Gilbert was a part of that, Blake Tidwell, Jose Butto. People went nuts when they saw that package and felt the Mets gave up too much. Well, Drew Gilbert, obviously, he's almost 25 years old and just cracking into the major leagues. He had a good first week with San Francisco and then completely disappeared. But Tyler Rogers, for the most part, held up. I would love to see him come back. I think he's been one of the better relievers and more consistent guys in baseball throughout his career. So I would love to see him come back. He, to me, really wasn't the problem. He had a couple outings where there was like dinky little hits. He really wasn't giving up monster shots and anything along those lines. But, Tyler Rogers, I guess, was the only real bright spot as far as the deadline went. But that plays a part of it. And a lot of people like to say, they needed to go get a starting pitcher at the deadline. Fine. I mean, if you look at a guy like Merrill Kelly, who obviously people could look back and say that the Mets should have went and got him. His numbers really weren't all that great when he went over to Texas. They weren't phenomenal. They weren't eye-popping. Could he have saved the season? Potentially. Obviously, you only had to win one game and you would have got in. But what I can counter to that is if Kodai Senga essentially returns to form and doesn't end up in AAA and was who he was in the first half of the season, the Mets make the playoffs. If Sean Manaea returns to form in any which way, shape, or form and doesn't miss any time, the Mets make the playoffs. So you can go out and say, yeah, they should have went and they should have overspent at the deadline for a starting pitcher, which that's why not a lot of starting pitchers got moved, because the asking price for them were through the roof. And that's a part of why the Mets ended up where they were. It is a disappointment. I'm not trying to, sit here and downplay it. Anytime you have expectations to make the playoffs and fail, it is absolutely a disappointment. And you have to look at why this all happened and not just, oh, it's a $314 million payroll and blah, blah, blah. No, that's not okay. And we could just throw that out for headlines and grabs. But the reality is there's a lot more, like I said, there's a lot more complex than just the payroll failed. Before I end all this, what I really want to address also in the matter is Steve Cohen and his comments. He came out and basically apologized to the fan base. Look, here's the deal. To make you feel better, he had to do this. For me, I didn't need this because I went through the Wilpons. I saw what they did to this team and how much they destroyed this organization from top to bottom. What Steve Cohen has done and what a lot of fans don't seem to realize is since his tenure of being owner for the last 5 years, he has gutted this franchise from the inside out. Everything you can think of, the scouting department, the medical staff, everything pertaining to fan experience, everything he has gutted from top to bottom. And he's trying to essentially emulate what the Dodgers have done. That is the blueprint. And that's exactly what they did. He had to learn the hard way when it came to throwing money at the problem. And I think he did. He learned pretty fast, essentially trading away Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander and eating their money and getting back the return that he did. But the fact now that this team has one of the better farm systems in baseball, they're on their way to doing that. And again, you don't build a sustainable winner in one offseason. It comes in pieces and it comes in droves. And that's what they're doing. Unfortunately, this season did not go as planned. And we have a lot more that's going to get into with this offseason. The last and final thought that I have, Pete Alonso and his comments regarding about opting out and the fact that he did it in the press conference after the Mets got eliminated. A lot of people are trying to troll this and saying that it's because the Mets missed the playoffs. And are you crazy? We all knew Pete Alonso was opting out probably by mid-May. Because if you guys remember, the beginning of the season, the Mets offense was putrid. What kept them in and what pushed them to the best record in baseball was that pitching staff. Pete Alonso was the only guy hitting up until about mid-May. He opened the season hitting about 350 for the first month or so. Everybody knew Pete Alonso was going to opt out. He was asked a question. He answered it honestly. And if he didn't, you guys would be ripping him apart for why doesn't he just say it? We all know he's going to. Well, he did. And people want to troll and say it's because the Mets didn't make the playoffs. Pete Alonso is opting out. If those are your thoughts, I sort of feel sorry for you because that's not the case. And you really should look at things as a whole and see what they are. Pete Alonso is opting out. Plain and simple. The Yankees, Cody Bellinger, he's in the playoffs. More than likely going to opt out. Alex Bregman is in the playoffs with the Red Sox. He will be opting out. If they don't win a World Series and don't make a run, is it because of that? No, because all three of them have had really good seasons and they're going to go get their money. Plain and simple. So any of you coming for Pete Alonso and saying that he shouldn't have did that and he shouldn't have said that, I think that's ridiculous because if he denied it or tried to brush it off, you would be ripping him apart for not being honest. And that's disingenuous in my opinion. So take it for what it is. You want guys to be honest with the media, they do, and then you rip them apart. And that's not okay. I think that's ridiculous. I love the fact that he was honest. And he's been the whole time. And the other side of that is he also said he loved playing for the Mets and he wants to come back. But that's the part that's being left out because it's not the clickbait and then the rage bait and the grab. Sorry, guys. I like that fact that he said it, and I like the fact that he was honest. He's going to go get his money. Might be with us. It might be with somebody else. It is what it is. What I will say in closing, I appreciate you guys for listening, to subscribing to this page, JBM Sports Media. We are all over the place. We are trying to take this by storm. We are on TikTok. We are on Instagram. As you guys are here on YouTube, we're trying to build something. We're trying to build an honest media company, and we're trying to do it the right way and see things from a perspective that's not just click and rage bait. We don't do that. I hate that more than anything. I go after it because that's what I think sports media is, and that's not what we are. So as again, like I close out in Diamond Discussions, if you guys have ever listened to that podcast on Spotify, I'm going to close out the same way here at JBM Sports Media. I appreciate you guys for listening. I appreciate the love. Thanks for hanging out.